So I think we're due for a cryptocurrency bounce here. I think we'll get up to about 25,000, maybe 28. Yeah, so the way I look at that is just that the charts are always going to be king, right? We heard about China, you know, the lockdowns and everything going on like that. And then we also heard that they started to loosen their policies and starting to open up a little bit. And that's actually where oil in the last couple of weeks topped out and started to roll over. It was almost like a sell the news event where price was going up in anticipation of the reopening. But once the reopening occurred, everyone said, okay, it's done now, they're reopening, now let's sell oil. And I think we have to keep in mind is that, yes, China is a monstrous economy, but if Europe is sliding into a bad recession like it's looking like, and we've seen the euro just get crushed against the dollar, and if we're seeing the US potentially head towards recession, then that chances are that's going to have an impact on China, right? So think about how many goods are bought from China and are shipped overseas to Europe, the US, various parts of the world. And then that likely will slow down China as well. So if you extrapolate it out, it's very possible that regardless of the reopening, oil demand is still going to go down if we're slipping into a global recession. So I think that the dollar, and this is the beauty of it. So if we bring up the chart of the US dollar, number one, the first thing that jumps out at me is just the incredible move that it's been under. And this is the weekly chart. So each candle that you're seeing is 1 week. So the low was put in right here in May of 2021. And we've gone almost straight up since then. And one of the things that I'm starting to note is saying, okay, well, where could be that high? I mean, where is the dollar going to top out? And what you want to do is you want to start looking for different trend lines. So right off the bat, I zoom out on my chart. Okay, well, we had a downsloping trend line, and I'm doing this real time, right? So here was your downsloping trend line. We broke above it. We then consolidated, and now you're seeing a breakout. What I would start to say is start looking at like this area here, which look at what we hit today, right? So you take a previous pivot high, notice how it hits here, and each time it's pulling back. You can even argue that this middle one right here, it also pulled back. So what this tells me as a chart technician is that this line is significant because, again, here it hit and pulled back. Here it kissed it and pulled back. Here it pierced it and pulled back. Well, guess what? We're back into that, so you can extrapolate out that in theory, we should see a pullback in the dollar here as well. So this is one of my cases for being in GDX right now, where I'm thinking that, okay, if the dollar is going to pull back, then GDX, the gold miners, should benefit from that. Gold should benefit from that. And if we go to the gold miners chart, here, look at this little support area right here. So we're basically kissing this extreme oversold condition for a little bit of a bounce. And please understand, folks, is that, you know, for the most part, I'm looking at 2 to 4 weeks out, right? I'm not looking at 6 months, 2 years, 10 years out. This is more shorter term, taking advantage of price action to your advantage. Yeah, so I'm even in the camp where we haven't even seen all-out capitulation in crypto yet. So now again, my early career was trading through the dot-coms. That was when I first started. And the dot-com similarity, and this is why bubbles are very similar, is because we as humans are trading, right? And we are ruled by the same emotions. So in every bubble, there's max greed. Everyone thinks it's so easy. Oh, you can throw that dart at that board and just make so much money. That's a bubble. You know, everyone's making money. The problem is bubbles collapse. And in the dot-com era, we saw a ton of dot-coms go out of business, and we saw many get bought out for pennies on the dollar. But we're just starting to see that in crypto, right? I think Voyager filed for bankruptcy. Celsius is having issues. We saw the Terra Luna collapse. So you're starting to see that, but you haven't achieved that wipeout where you're going to see, let's say, 90% of all cryptocurrencies go to zero. And they think that's what has to happen. If you look at the dot-com bubble, when we emerged out of that, you basically had a handful of dot-coms. You had Amazon, you had a few other ones out there that survived. Everything else either got bought out or essentially went to zero and went into bankruptcy. So I think we're due for a cryptocurrency bounce here. I think we'll get up to about 25,000, maybe 28. But I do think you have more downside in crypto, at least to 12. We need to see people just being like, oh my goodness, crypto's done. When people like literally give up, I mean, this happened in 2018 as well, after the 2017 high. There was like this, no one wanted to talk about crypto. It was like Fight Club. You just didn't talk about it, right? And that was the key when the bottom was in. We haven't gotten to that point yet in crypto. So with the markets, and let me pivot because I know you asked me about the markets, is the markets are in that same position. We've seen a drop, but you haven't even got close to capitulation, right? And so just to show my chart of the NASDAQ here, or the QQQ, at the very least, I think we have to go down to the pre-COVID highs. I mean, that's just, to me, the pre-COVID highs are even just going there, even if we don't go into a recession, meaning that the Fed, if they're really taking out all the liquidity that was put in during the COVID craziness of just printing trillions of dollars, well, in the very least, if they're removing that, we have to go back to that pivot high. If we start going into a recession, then you start looking at like a trend line like this, which would be the longer trend going back to about 2015. Right. And both of these, by the way, are quite a bit lower. I mean, we're talking about 15% lower here, and this would be about 20% lower at that point, or maybe even a little bit more. So I think that the equity markets still have a long way to go. We haven't even seen an earnings recession yet, where earnings start to drop versus still going higher. The consumer is certainly pulling back now. Even after the reopening we're seeing in the US here, consumer being much more careful. So I think, again, equity markets still have more downside, and after a bounce, crypto likely as well.